What if I tell you that if you stay to the end of this video, you will hear the names of products you should avoid because they are tools that would be used to infiltrate and cause the most devastating disaster the world has ever known. Most importantly, the people behind it, their identities have been disclosed. This is greater than COVID-19. Yes, if only you stay to the end. Kindly tell us where you are watching this from, so we can continue to pray with you, as we have always done. I will begin sharing today's experience. My name is Dr. James Mitchell, and for 27 years, I served in the field of psychiatry. I have spent nearly 3 decades listening to the innermost thoughts of thousands of people, their fears, their traumas, their broken dreams, their spiritual crises, their deepest shames and regrets. I have sat in darkened offices with people on the edge of suicide, and I have held their hands while they confronted the demons that haunted them. I have prescribed medications that saved lives and attended funerals of patients I could not save. I have witnessed the fragility of the human mind and the resilience of the human spirit in equal measure. I earned my MD from Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. I completed my residency in psychiatry at Massachusetts General Hospital. I have published papers in peer-reviewed journals. I have consulted with hospitals and government agencies. I have trained younger psychiatrists in the ethical practice of medicine. But nothing, absolutely nothing in my entire career as a man of science and reason could have prepared me for what happened to me on February 28, 2026. My career had been successful, perhaps too successful. I had achieved status and recognition. I had built a thriving private practice. I had published influential papers. I had trained residents. I had consulted for the National Institute of Mental Health. But somewhere in the midst of all that achievement, I had become hollow. I did not realize it at the time, but looking back now, I can see that I was a man who had everything externally, but was empty internally. I was respected by my colleagues, but I was not connected to anything larger than myself. I had knowledge but no wisdom. I had success but no meaning. This was the man I was when I walked into my office on February 28th, 2026, for what would turn out to be one final morning of my old life. It was a cold morning in Boston. I had an early appointment with a patient, a 32-year-old woman named Sophie, who had been struggling with severe anxiety and depression following a series of personal losses. I was driving to my office in the Beacon Hill neighborhood when it happened. I was stuck in traffic on Storrow Drive, the morning commute crawling along, when I felt the first twinge in my chest. I was 63 years old. I was overweight. I did not exercise regularly. I had high blood pressure, though it was nominally controlled with medication. I had a family history of heart disease. My father had suffered a heart attack at 62. I knew all the risk factors. I had counseled countless patients on the importance of cardiac health. But I had been complacent about my own health, dismissing warning signs, putting off appointments with my cardiologist. The pain started subtly. A pressure, an ache. I thought perhaps it was indigestion. I had skipped breakfast, consumed too much coffee. I rubbed my chest and tried to focus on the traffic ahead of me. But the pain did not go away. Instead, it grew. It intensified slowly at first, then with terrifying speed. Within moments, it had become something beyond pain, something catastrophic. It was as if my chest was being crushed by an invisible hand. My left arm began to tingle, then to burn. My vision blurred. My hands began to shake. I knew what was happening. I was having a myocardial infarction. I was having a heart attack. I managed to pull my car onto the shoulder of the road. I turned on my emergency flashers. I fumbled for my phone, trying to dial 911, but my hands were shaking so badly that I could not operate it. I tried to lean back in my seat, tried to breathe, but breathing made it worse. The pain was all-consuming. There was nothing in my conscious awareness except the agony in my chest and the growing certainty that I was dying. The last thing I remember from that moment was the sound of my car horn, which I must have knocked with my body as I seized, and the blur of cars passing by, the drivers probably looking at me with concern but not stopping. And then, like a light being switched off, everything went black. But the blackness did not last. It was not the blackness of death or unconsciousness. It was a transition, a threshold. And on the other side of that threshold was something that my decades of scientific training had told me could not possibly exist. I became aware that I was no longer in my body. I was looking down at my physical form slumped in the driver's seat of my car, one hand pressed against my chest, my face contorted with pain. But I felt no pain. I felt nothing but a profound sense of peace, as if a terrible burden had been lifted from my shoulders. I was floating, suspended in a space that was neither inside nor outside the car. I could see my body below me, but I was not concerned about it. I felt a deep curiosity about what was happening, but no fear. The scientific part of my mind was frantically trying to explain this away. I was hallucinating. My dying brain was generating a classic near-death experience as endorphins flooded my system. This was the phenomenon that Pim van Lommel had documented in his studies, the classic features of an NDE. But even as I tried to rationalize what was happening, I knew with absolute certainty that this was not a hallucination. This was real in a way that was more real than ordinary reality. The clarity of my perception was not diminished. It was enhanced. I could see with a vividness that I had never experienced before. My thoughts were clearer, sharper, more precise than they had ever been. This was not the confusion of a dying brain. This was awakening. I felt myself being drawn upward, pulled through layers of reality. I was moving through a darkness, but it was not a frightening darkness. It was the darkness of a womb, of a space where something is being gestated, where something is being prepared. And then, suddenly, I emerged into light. The light was unlike anything I had ever seen. It was not the light of the sun or of an electric lamp. It was a light that seemed to emanate from the very fabric of existence itself. It was golden and white and every color at once. It seemed to have consciousness, to have intention. I could feel the light on my being, not on my skin, because I had no skin in this place, but on the essence of what I was. And the light was warm. It was welcoming. It felt like love itself had been given physical form, or as close to physical form as something could be in this realm. As my eyes adjusted to the light, if eyes and light could be said to function here in any conventional sense, I began to see the landscape around me. There were structures in the distance that resembled buildings, but they were not made of brick or stone or metal. They seemed to be made of the same luminous substance as the light itself, as if someone had somehow sculpted light into architectural form. The structures had a quality of permanence and strength, but they also seemed to shimmer, to exist in multiple states simultaneously. The ground beneath my feet, and I became aware that I had feet, that I was standing on ground, though I had not moved or consciously taken a step, was smooth and crystalline. It reflected light, but not in the way ordinary reflection works. The reflection seemed to go infinitely deep, as if I was standing on a surface that contained within it infinite depths of beauty and meaning. I understood then, without being told, that I was dead. My body had experienced a fatal myocardial infarction on Storrow Drive in Boston. But I was not gone. I was here, in this place, more alive than I had ever been. And I was about to be shown why I had been brought to this place, what knowledge I was meant to carry back with me to the world I had left behind. I became aware of a presence beside me, though I did not see anything arrive. It was simply suddenly there, the way you become aware of someone in a dark room without seeing them approach. At first, I could not make out its form clearly. It seemed to shimmer, to be composed of the same light as everything else around me, but with a density and intentionality that was distinct. And then it became clearer. I was seeing an angel. I know how this sounds to a rational mind. I know that my younger self, the scientist who rejected all supernatural claims, would have tried to explain this away, but there was no explaining it. There was only witnessing it. The angel had a form that was vaguely humanoid, but it was not human. It was composed of light and power and the kind of fierce intelligence that was almost overwhelming to perceive. The angel did not speak in words. Instead, it communicated directly to my mind, to the essence of my being. But the communication was so clear, so unambiguous, that I understood it as perfectly as if it had been spoken aloud in English. The angel conveyed to me that I was here because I needed to be shown something. I was here because I had been selected, not for any goodness in me, for I knew I was not a good man in the way that truly good people are good, but because of my knowledge, because of my knowledge, because of my position, because of my understanding of the human mind and the human spirit. The angel conveyed to me that I had spent 27 years studying the disorders of the mind, the ways in which the human consciousness could become distorted, fractured, and sick. I had trained myself to recognize pathology in the mental realm. I had developed tools to diagnose and to treat psychological illness. But what I had never done, the angel showed me, was to fully understand how vulnerable the human mind is to manipulation, how easily the human consciousness can be poisoned, how readily people will accept false narratives if those narratives are presented by authorities they trust. The angel showed me that my training, my knowledge of neurobiology and psychology, had given me both insight and blindness. I could see clearly the mechanisms by which the brain generates thoughts and feelings and perceptions. But in my focus on the material substrate of the brain, I had become blind to the spiritual dimensions of mental illness, to the ways in which evil can operate in the world, to the reality of cosmic warfare between forces of light and darkness. The angel conveyed to me that this blindness was not unique to me. It was characteristic of my entire age, my entire civilization. We had become so focused on the material, the measurable, the quantifiable, that we had lost the ability to perceive deeper truths. And this blindness, this inability to see clearly, had made us vulnerable. It had made us prey to those who understood the psychology of manipulation far more thoroughly than we did. The angel then showed me something that caused me to cry out, though I had no voice in this place. It was a vision, but it was not like visions that people report in psychiatric interviews. Those are usually vague, dreamlike, symbolical. This was concrete, specific, detailed, hyper-real. I was seeing something that was actually happening, what was about to happen in the physical world I had left behind. I was shown a laboratory. It was a state-of-the-art facility, though it was hidden, secreted away in an underground bunker in a location I was shown but cannot disclose. Scientists in protective gear were working with samples of a virus. The virus was not naturally occurring. It had been engineered, designed in a laboratory by brilliant minds working in service of an agenda that was entirely antithetical to human flourishing. The angel showed me the name of this virus, Neurophil X. As soon as I was shown the name, I knew with absolute certainty what I was being shown. This was not a natural pandemic. This was a planned biological attack, engineered and refined over years, designed to be released at a specific time to achieve specific objectives. But unlike anything I had studied in my career, unlike any psychiatric phenomenon I had ever encountered, this threat was not rooted in individual pathology. This was a threat that came from the highest levels of power, from men and women who commanded vast resources, who wielded influence over governments, who controlled the information that billions of people consumed every day. The angel showed me 3 specific men who were the architects of this plan. I could not see their faces clearly. It was as if they were protected by some kind of darkness, as if there was a barrier preventing their faces from being fully revealed to me. But I was shown their names, shown their positions of power, shown the extent of their influence, and I was shown in excruciating detail the evil calculus that drove them. As a psychiatrist, I had studied the minds of evil men. I had worked in forensic contexts, evaluating murderers and rapists. I had read the literature on psychopathy, narcissism, and other personality disorders that seemed to predispose people to cruelty. But what the angel showed me transcended anything I had encountered in my professional experience. The first man was a technology billionaire, a man who had built an empire that gave him the power to shape what billions of people saw, heard, and believed. The angel showed me inside his mind. He genuinely believed, and this was perhaps the most frightening part, that he was good. He believed that his control over information was necessary, that he was protecting people from false information, from dangerous ideas. He had constructed a narrative in which he was the hero of the story, in which his manipulation was noble and necessary. He had surrounded himself with people who reinforced this narrative. He had convinced himself that the ends justified the means, and that there was no limit to what he could do in service of his vision. The second man was a real estate and financial magnate, a man who had built a vast empire and had influence over governments and economies. The angel showed me that his motivation was simpler, more nakedly self-interested. He wanted power and money, and he would do anything to acquire more of both. He had no illusions about being good. He simply did not care about anyone but himself. His wealth was obscene, his power immense, and his hunger for more of both was insatiable. The third man was the most sophisticated, the most dangerous. He was a businessman and philanthropist who had positioned himself as a benefactor to humanity. He had created foundations, donated billions to medical research, positioned himself as the savior of the developing world. But the angel showed me that all of this was a facade. Beneath the philanthropic veneer was a deeply disturbed mind, a man who believed that humanity needed to be controlled, that the human population needed to be reduced, that people were a problem to be solved. His evil was dressed up in the language of science and progress, but it was evil nonetheless. The angel showed me their plan with a clarity that was impossible to misunderstand. At the end of March 2026, just weeks away from the moment I was being shown this, the virus would be released. It would be introduced into the population through pharmaceutical supply chains. Medications that people trusted, that doctors prescribed, that patients took without hesitation, would be contaminated. The contamination would be subtle, undetectable by standard testing. The virus would begin to spread through the population. The angel showed me in detail how this would happen. I was shown pharmaceutical manufacturing facilities, shown how the virus would be introduced into production lines. I was shown the decisions being made in conference rooms, the meetings between government officials and the perpetrators of this crime. I was shown corruption, bribery, blackmail, the mechanisms through which powerful men ensured that other powerful men remained silent. The virus itself was shown to me in vivid detail. As a physician, I could understand the mechanisms by which it would function. It was designed to attack the nervous system with devastating efficiency. It would produce respiratory symptoms initially, symptoms that would resemble influenza or COVID-19, causing people to seek treatment and medical intervention. But within days or weeks, the virus would move beyond the respiratory system. It would cross the blood-brain barrier. It would begin to affect the prefrontal cortex, the regions of the brain responsible for executive function, decision-making, emotional regulation, and impulse control. The angel showed me what this would do to the human mind. I would see people losing their ability to think clearly, losing their emotional stability, becoming violent or catatonic. I would see a population being transformed from within, their brains being systematically destroyed by a pathogen that was invisible, that was unstoppable, that they would never see coming. The mortality rate was staggering. The angel showed me the numbers, and I was horrified. This would kill more people than the COVID-19 pandemic, kill them more quickly, kill them in more suffering. It would not discriminate by age or health status. Young people would die. Children would die. It would be indiscriminate in its cruelty. But what made it truly devastating was what it would do to the survivors. Those who survived the acute phase of the infection would be left with permanent neurological damage. Thousands would be unable to return to work. Families would be shattered. The fabric of society would tear. And then the angel showed me the second phase of the plan, when the fear was at its peak, when people were desperate for a solution, a cure would be offered. A vaccine, a miracle drug, a savior treatment that would be rushed through regulatory approval, that would be promoted relentlessly, that would be presented as the only hope. As a psychiatrist, I recognized the psychological mechanisms at work here with devastating clarity. People in fear are susceptible to manipulation. People who are desperate will accept solutions that they might otherwise question. And if the authority figures, the doctors, the government, the news media all presented this cure as safe and effective, people would accept it without reservation. They would line up for it. They would demand it from their neighbors and friends. They would attack those who were hesitant. But the angel showed me that this cure was also part of the plan. It was not a solution. It was the final phase of the attack. The vaccine contained a dormant form of the virus, a form that would activate in the presence of a secondary agent that would be released later, creating a two-step infection that would ensure maximum penetration and maximum suffering. I understood then, with the clarity that the angel was giving me, that I was being shown a conspiracy so vast, so carefully planned, so utterly evil in its conception, that it would seem unbelievable to anyone who had not been shown what I was being shown. It would seem like the paranoid fantasies of a disturbed mind. This was, in fact, something that I would later recognize as one of the reasons I had been chosen for this revelation. As a psychiatrist, I had spent decades learning to distinguish between genuine threats and the products of distorted thinking. My training would give me credibility that might otherwise be absent. The angel then showed me the aftermath of this attack on humanity. I was shown a vision of the world in the months and years following the release of Neuroful X. I saw cities in chaos, hospitals overwhelmed, people dying in streets and homes and hospitals, their brains ravaged by a pathogen that attacked the very seat of their consciousness. I saw the economic collapse that would follow. I saw the supply chains breaking down. I saw the stock market crashing. I saw unemployment reaching catastrophic levels. I saw families choosing between food and medicine. I saw tent cities springing up in the parks of major cities, filled with the homeless and the destitute. I saw the social breakdown that would accompany the physical devastation. I saw communities fragmenting. I saw neighbor turning against neighbor. I saw families divided by fear and conflicting narratives about what had happened and what should be done. I saw the mental health crisis that would emerge from the trauma and the loss. And I wept, knowing that my profession would be utterly overwhelmed, that I would be unable to help the countless people who would be suffering from PTSD and grief and depression and existential despair. I saw how other nations would respond. I saw borders closing. I saw other countries taking advantage of America's weakness and chaos to make aggressive moves. I saw the geopolitical order that had existed for decades being overturned. I saw China moving on Taiwan. I saw Russia consolidating power in Eastern Europe. I saw the Middle East descending into war. Most terrifying of all, I was shown the spiritual aftermath. I was shown a nation that had lost faith, not just faith in God, but faith in institutions, faith in truth, faith in the possibility of building a functioning society. I was shown people retreating into cynicism and despair. I was shown a population that had been so traumatized by what it had experienced that it had become incapable of the optimism and the trust that are necessary for a functioning civilization. And then the angel showed me something that transformed everything. It showed me that this evil had not arisen by accident. There were forces at work, not physical forces, but spiritual forces. The men who were orchestrating this attack were not acting alone. They were tools of something darker, something more ancient, something that had been opposed to human flourishing since the beginning of creation. The angel showed me that the spiritual realm was real, that good and evil were genuine cosmic forces, that the struggle between them was not a metaphor or a symbol, but the central reality of human existence. I had spent 27 years studying the human mind as if it were a closed system, as if consciousness could be explained entirely through neurobiology. But what I was being shown was that the human mind is a battlefield, that the thoughts and feelings and choices of human beings are influenced and contested by forces beyond the material realm. The angel showed me that I had been wrong about almost everything. I had been wrong to dismiss the spiritual. I had been wrong to reduce human experience to neurochemistry. I had been wrong to exclude transcendence from my understanding of what it meant to be human. But I was being shown these things not to shame me, not to condemn me, but to prepare me. The angel conveyed to me that I was being given a choice. I could return to my body. I could return to the world, and I could share this warning. Or I could stay here in this realm of light, could rest from my labors, could experience the peace and the beauty that surrounded me. The angel showed me that it was genuinely my choice. God did not force revelation upon unwilling messengers, but I also felt the weight of responsibility. If I chose to stay, if I chose to abandon my task, then countless people would die unprepared. The families of those people would be devastated. The nation would fall into chaos without having been warned. I would have had a chance to help, and I would have chosen comfort instead. I understood then what the angel was calling me to do. I understood that I was being sent back to speak a truth that would seem impossible to most people, sent back to a world that would not want to hear what I had to say, sent back to a calling that would likely destroy my reputation and my career. But I understood that this was what my life had been preparing me for. Everything that I had learned, everything that I had experienced had been preparing me for this moment. The return to my body was violently shocking. One moment I was in that realm of light, experiencing a peace and a clarity that transcended anything I had known in my material life. And the next moment I was being torn away, being thrown back, being yanked down into flesh and pain and limitation. My chest exploded with agony. My heart was beating, but it felt like it was trying to tear itself apart. I was gasping for air. I was overwhelmed by sensation, the hardness of the steering wheel against my forehead, the cold air coming through the slightly open window, the vibration of my running engine, the sound of traffic around me. For a moment, I panicked. The contrast between the peace of that other realm and the agony of this one was so extreme that I thought I was being thrust into hell, that I had somehow been deceived, that I was being punished. But then I felt a warmth in my chest, a presence, and I understood that I was being sustained. The angel had not abandoned me. I was being kept alive by means that transcended medical science. I heard the sound of sirens. Someone had called 911. Emergency responders were arriving. I heard the sound of doors opening, voices shouting, people running. I heard someone saying, "He's got a pulse, but it's weak. Get the defibrillator." I was loaded into an ambulance. I remember fragments of that experience. The oxygen mask being placed over my face, the feeling of a needle being inserted into my arm, the sound of radio chatter. I remember the paramedic asking me what my name was, and being unable to answer, being unable to speak, being able to do nothing but lie there and endure the agony of my body and the overwhelming weight of what I had been shown. I was rushed to Massachusetts General Hospital, the same hospital where I had completed my residency in psychiatry decades earlier. I was taken to the intensive care unit. I was hooked up to monitors and reefing tubes. I was put into a medically induced coma while my heart was being stabilized, while they determined whether I would need emergency bypass surgery. Over the next 72 hours, I underwent emergency cardiac procedures. A stent was placed in my left anterior descending artery. My heart muscle had sustained significant damage, what is called an anterior wall myocardial infarction with significant reduction in ejection fraction. By all medical standards, I should have died on that road in Boston. By all medical standards, I should not have survived. But I did survive. And when I woke up from my medically induced coma, I knew exactly why. I had been spared, been kept alive, because I had a message to deliver. This is why I am sharing this account with you now. I am a man of science who has been shown something that transcends science. I am a man who spent 27 years studying the disorders of the human mind, who has now been shown the reality of evil operating at the highest levels of power. I am a man who was a confirmed atheist only weeks ago, who is now absolutely certain of the reality of God and the reality of spiritual warfare. I do not expect you to believe me based solely on my authority as a physician. I know how that would sound, but I am asking you to take the warning seriously, based on the specificity of what I have been shown. Look at the information I have provided. Examine the mechanisms that I have described. Consider whether they are plausible, whether they are consistent with what you know about how pharmaceutical supply chains work, how viruses are engineered, how vaccines operate. More than anything else, I am asking you to pray. I am asking you to take seriously the spiritual dimension of what is happening. The angel showed me that prayer is not a passive acceptance of fate. Prayer is action, genuine action in the spiritual realm that has real effects in the material world. When we pray, we are aligning ourselves with the forces of light and goodness that are opposed to the forces of darkness and evil. I am asking you to get right with God. Whether you are a Christian or a person of another faith tradition, whether you are agnostic or skeptical, I am asking you to reach out to transcendence, to acknowledge that there is something greater than yourself, and to seek alignment with that which is good and true and beautiful. I am asking you to prepare physically, as the angel also instructed. Have food and water stored. Have medications that your family needs. Have a plan for what you will do if the infrastructure of society breaks down. Have a way to communicate with your family members if normal communications fail. Most importantly, I am asking you to love the people in your life with intensity and intention. Tell your family that you love them. Spend time with your friends. Build community bonds that will sustain you when the crisis comes. Be the kind of person who will help others when chaos erupts, not the kind of person who will retreat into self-protection. I do not know if what I have warned you about can be stopped. I do not know if God will permit this evil to come to pass or if he will intervene at the last moment. But I know that if we, the people of faith and goodness, come together in prayer and in action, there is hope. I know that God has not left us defenseless. I know that we have been given warnings, given knowledge, given the tools we need to survive and to resist. The angel showed me one more thing before I returned to my body. It showed me that even if the worst comes to pass, even if the plague is released and millions die and society collapses, there is still hope, because beyond the chaos and the suffering, there is the possibility of renewal. There is the possibility of a new beginning, a world rebuilt on foundations of faith and community and mutual love, rather than on the foundations of greed and power and control. That is the vision that sustains me now, even as I prepare to speak a warning that I know most people will not want to hear. I have been given a choice between comfort and truth, and I have chosen truth. I ask that you do the same. The end of March is coming. The time for complacency is over. Be prepared, be watchful, be faithful, and may God grant us all the wisdom and the courage to face what is coming with our souls intact and our faith unshaken. This is my testimony. This is my warning. May God bless you and keep you and guide you through the trials that lie ahead. Dr. James Mitchell, February 28, 2026.